for Morton for putting this very important private member's motion to the House for debate. Multiculturalism is the foundation of the modern Australian society, and although this motion refers to multiculturalism policy since 1973, the truth is that Australia began becoming a multicultural society long before that. We can go back to the First Fleet, to Muslims from Afghanistan and the Chinese of the Gold Rush period, not to mention the migration of people from the United Kingdom and Ireland. But it was Arthur Calwell's expansive migration program of the late 1940s that embarked on an ambitious and massive migration program that sourced migrants from war-torn Europe, the United Kingdom and the United States that sowed the foundation for modern multicultural Australia. With the pronouncement that we cannot hold this continent with 7.5 million people, Calwell and his contemporaries set about changing the cultural face of Australian society in the pursuit of nationhood building and prosperity. It's no coincidence, Deputy Speaker, that Calwell has been referred to as the father of multiculturalism, a reference not often countenanced in the history of multiculturalism. The election of a Whitlam government in 1972 led to the official formation and adoption of a policy that sought to effect and implement the integration of migrant Australia. Multiculturalism recognised the strength of our cultural diversity. It recognised that for migrants it wasn't only their labour but also their cultural inheritance that was a vital nation-building resource for our prosperity. As a policy, multiculturalism created a socially and culturally inclusive society, in making us a richer and more vibrant nation and in providing a fair go for all, underpinned at all times by the principles of access and equity in its service delivery. A key piece of legislation established was the Racial Discrimination Act, a legal framework that ensured the protection of people's rights and their dignity was at all times the foremost of importance. By and large, Deputy Speaker, multicultural policy has enjoyed bipartisanship at both state and federal levels, but this has not always been the case. We have over recent years endured debates that call for multiculturalism to be abandoned because it's seen as divisive and detrimental to Australia. Nothing is further from the truth. Without multicultural policy, Australia's migrant society would not have achieved the social cohesion we have that has enabled us to prosper as a success story of Australian nationhood. Now, Deputy Speaker, I know the Prime Minister believes this also, and I want to commend him for his multicultural statement which he launched last week, a statement that promotes inclusion and integration. But I want to ask him why he has sought to undermine this statement by moving to amend the 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act. By weakening 18C, the Turnbull government is sending mixed signals. On the one hand, it supports multiculturalism, but on the other, it doesn't support the very tools needed to protect and ensure our social cohesion. The second coming of one nation and the formation of other conservative groups means that debates around these very important issues that ultimately are about our national identity remain timely and critical. Pauline Hanson is the same crude voice today as she was 20 years ago. Her current target is Muslim Australians, and she goes as far as saying, and I quote, "Islam is a disease, we need to vaccinate ourselves against that." Deputy Speaker, is this not insulting and humiliating? It sure is offensive, and it's a disgraceful display of small-mindedness and opportunism. I disagree with the Prime Minister. There is nothing sophisticated about Pauline Hanson Mark II. She remains as bigoted, unsophisticated and crass as she has always been. It's Muslims today, 20 years ago it was Asians, and I'm sure 50 years ago it would have been Europeans, my family and I included. Pauline Hanson threatens our national security. The Prime Minister is right to point this out. Her views undermine our social cohesion. She and others like her use the pretext of freedom of speech to promote verbal violence, and as such she has to be held to account. George Zangalis is an Australian, a unionist, chair of 3ZZZ Community Radio and one of the unwanted Australians. He has spent most of his life fighting racist remarks, such as those espoused by Pauline Hanson. And I want to quote George, Deputy Speaker, and he says, "It took a long time of sustained efforts to legislate against racism and enshrine multiculturalism as the glue that binds the nation together. The Turnbull government's amendments strike at the very heart of such protection. Under threat It has been freedom of speech, especially for those who yield power and cry the loudest for taking the guts out of 18C by protecting against racism for minorities that 18C currently provides, quote unquote.